Hello, Nicolás.
Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
Fine, and you?
I'm okay, thank you.
So you're from Bogota in Colombia?
Yes, I am.
What time is it over there?
It's 10:45 in the morning.
Okay, cool. And from what else you told me, you're an associate professor in medieval literature. You're doing digital humanities at the Universidad de los Andes.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I teach everything related to Latin and Latin literature and mostly medieval literature. And I also teach in the master's program in digital humanities.
Okay. Well, I guess we can listen your talk. It's about Tech and Coding Initiative XML, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, you have the screen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you are seeing my screen?
Yes, perfect. We can see your
thank
screen
you.
and hear you.
Great. Well, thank you for coming to my talk. I wish to speak about the workflow I'm using in working with TEI-XML documents to transform them to LaTeX and to produce from that result print-ready PDF for publishing. This is the background of this work is my Spanish annotated translation of a late medieval work called Salomon and Marcolfus. It's a work dating at least to the 11th century, and there are several translations into modern languages, but none to Spanish. So I decided to create, since I work in digital humanities and work with the text encoding initiative, TEI, and I work with LaTeX and related technologies. I wanted to create a Spanish annotated translation, digitally born, not produced from other sources. This is an image of one of the printed editions. This is a 1514 printed edition, but I'm working also with the manuscripts. So as I said, it's born digital. I'm using TEI-XML with a custom ODD and relaxing schemas to ensure consistency and validity of all sources. And the results of this work should be, well, a web page, a web application indeed, using HTML and cascading style sheets, and a print-ready PDF. In this moment, I'm only going to speak about the print-ready PDF. There are several ways of producing a PDF output from XML. I chose here the possibility that I chose here to use XSLT transformations to produce a LaTeX or LuaLaTeX indeed output, and from and therein produce a print-ready PDF. I'm going to speak about that. So the original plan of this work, the translation is ready. The TEI document is finished. Is for almost every type of TEI element, say a quotation, a paragraph, a chapter division, create an XSLT template which transforms it into a LuaLaTeX text. I'm using LuaLaTeX because I need full Unicode support. I'm using several scripts, not only Latin scripts, but ancient Greek and Hebrew in some cases. So I needed full Unicode support, and with LaTeX you can do that with XSLT, or I don't know how you pronounce it, XSLT and LuaLaTeX, and I'm very familiar with Lua. And as I will mention in a moment, I thought I could use some Lua code in my LaTeX sources to do some processing. So the idea is, if I have, for instance, this text in the original source, in the TEI-XML source, some text which is in the content of a highlight element, which should be rendered as an italic text in italics. The idea is to transform this into something like this in LaTeX, an emphasis env or text IT with some text. And that's not very difficult to do with XSLT. For instance, this is a simple XSLT template to do that. It selects the highlight elements which have a rend attribute whose value is italic, and will produce this text env and open braces, then the content of the element, and it close the braces. Of course, it can be a little bit more interesting and more complex, because there are several kinds of highlighting, and thus I would have to take care of, for instance, small caps, boldface, text in superscript, text in upshade, which is I don't know how to say it. It's not italicized but straight, and in the ultimate case, just emphasize. So this is a very simple XSLT template. All processing, so to speak, is done in the XSLT. I mean by that that the XSLT template, the XSLT transformations, select the appropriate LaTeX commands depending on the value of this attribute. So everything is done in the XSLT. But there are more complex problems, more complex cases, and thus I bumped into I bumped into several problems, several issues, some small ones easy to fix, but other more difficult ones, and I can reduce them to two kind of problems. One is the whitespace problem, and the other is the processing problem, and I'm going to talk about them here. So the whitespace problem is a very common problem you have when working with XML. Sorry. Even though XML swallows, so to speak, multiple white spaces and multiple line breaks, you have to deal with the line breaks in this case in order to avoid unnecessary introduction of unwanted spaces. So for instance, this is a paragraph with some text, and this is a note, and this should be rendered as an end note in my edition. And I want to stress here that since I'm working with the source file, it's an XML, a TEI-XML document, I need that code to be readable. Let me show you an example. I don't know. Let me have to share this another screen here. Bear with me a minute. I always lose my. Well, I couldn't change. I lost my my original way of well, never mind. So of course, as I was saying, I want my source file to be human readable. If I eliminate the indentations and line breaks, of course the XSLT can process it without a problem, but it won't be readable for me or easily readable, because I need to easily see and detect the structure. So there's a compromise between readability in the source XML files and the white space problem that you will be creating unnecessary space, and you have to deal with that. XSLT has some ways of dealing with that, but there are other ways. There are some problems you cannot solve with the XSLT rules. So this would be rendered without further processing, just using my XSLT transformations as this line which is the second line of this paragraph, and it would be introducing a white space before the footnote anchor here, the end note. Sorry. So how do you deal with that? You can manually edit the output LaTeX text, but the idea is to automate as much as possible. So the way I use and the way many people use is to apply regular expressions using set, for instance, or another language. I chose to use Python for this, which I'm a little bit familiar with. And I created a Python script that removes all unwanted white space. And as I said before, this cannot be done only with XSLT. And this cannot be done only with the LaTeX or the LuaLaTeX. At least I couldn't do that. So I introduced a further step here. So we have the TEI-XML sources, the transformations I use, and I produce a LuaLaTeX output. Then I use a Python script, and here are some examples of the regular expressions. This is the search string, and this is the replace string. There are more or less 30 different search and replacement. This is just a Python list, and then you obtain a cleaner LuaLaTeX output. So this was the way I use and other people use to remove that redundant space, or to remove that unnecessary space. Of course, not all spaces are removable. You know, if you remove a line break in a LaTeX file, well, you can just get only one line, and you don't want to do that. So you must be very careful of where to do those removals. Okay, the processing problem is the following. I need to do some processing of the text I have in the sources, in the TEI-XML sources. And the problem is where to do it. Ideally, you should do it either in the XSLT transformations. All processing should be done like that, as I showed in this example before. You have an element with some attributes and some values of those attributes, and all processing is done here, and you just get the LaTeX output, the LaTeX commands. But the LaTeX document isn't processing further this. So that's one place. Or you could simplify as much as possible the XSLT transformations, and all the transformation can be done in LaTeX or in LuaLaTeX. The idea is that well, it's not just only one of those places to do all the processing. It's simpler code, and it's more easily to maintain. So that's what I was looking for, but I couldn't do that. I can tell you that. I had to do some processing in the XSLT, and some processes, by which I mean I had to design some commands in LaTeX and the LaTeX source to further process what was the output of the XSLT. And that might be because I don't know too much about the XSLT, or I don't know too much about Lua, because for some cases I tried to use Lua code. There are some discussions in the Stack Exchange website. You can look for them, where I try to ask questions about how to do some processing in Lua to avoid doing it in XSLT. But I couldn't, so I had to do in both of these worlds, which isn't, in my perspective, the best solution. So let me show you an example. This is, we have one quotation embedded in another one. This foreign element is used in TEI just to mark out a text which is supposed to be in another language from the main language. I'm using it here in my definition of my document as a foreign quote, and it should be used as a quote, and it has another quote inside. The XML :lang attribute contains the language used, of whose content must be specified. In this case, it's Latin. Well, what's the problem? The problem is that the XML lang takes as a value an ISO standard of language names, Lat for Latin, ENM, as I show you in a moment, for Middle English, and so on. And those Latin languages, those XML languages, those language codes do not match, of course, Babel's, LaTeX Babel's language codes. So there has to be some processing of that. I tried to do that in Lua code, and I found some problems with that, with the compilation of the document, the typesetting of the document rather. So I decided to do that processing in XSLT. I'll show you right now. So just to make clear what I'm talking about, these language codes are the language code for XML, or that's the standard. You could use other ones, but this is standard, and I want to be follow the standard, so other people can use and reuse my work. But these language codes aren't the same as used by Babel, which is the language and hyphenation, how to call it, library using LaTeX. So we must transform it. This is what I mean by a further processing of the text. The problem is where should I do it? In the XSLT transformations or in the LuaLaTeX document? Well, as I told you, I resorted only in this case to XSLT transformation. So I created a simple template and a simple function used in my XSLT style sheets, and selects according to the value of XML, the XML lang, which you can find here in single quotes. This is Anglo-Saxon, Old English, Middle English, Modern English language, Spanish, Old French, Middle French, Modern French, Ancient Greek, Welsh, and German. According to this value, select and produce this language code, which can be used by Babel. As you can notice, and this has, I think, reverberates the previous discussion, the previous talk, we have, well, at least as I know, we don't have Old English or Anglo-Saxon or Middle English languages and hyphenation rules in Babel. I might be wrong, but I just resorted to choose English for that, and it worked fine. Latin, Spanish, French, the same problem here. Greek, Welsh, and German. This is the transformation, the template, and it matches foreign quotes mentioned. For instance, if I'm mentioning and not using an expression which should be quoted, clauses, which are the explanation of those quotes, for instance, and quotes, this Q, sorry, which do not belong to citations. As I define citations in my ODD and in my RelaxNG schemas, citations are more complex elements containing a quote in an original text, and you use the quote element in TEI, followed by a translation. If it's not, in my case, if it's not Spanish, well, it should have a translation. If it's in Old French, for instance, I included the translation, and lastly, a citation, which for which I use in the LaTeX document, BibLaTeX, which I love and which I found very useful for my purpose. So this template concerns all quotes not belonging to a citation. And what do I do here? Well, I create, and I previously defined, and I'll show you the definition, original quote, a quote command, which I'll show you the definition in a moment in LaTeX, which has the language code as its first argument, and this is here. It selects using the previous function I showed you here, the appropriate Babel language, and this is here. If it doesn't include an XML lang attribute value, then it simply, as a default, chooses Spanish because it's a Spanish translation. Then includes a label taken from the XML ID. That's for me to be able to cross-reference every citation and every quote, and to create an index of that. And lastly, I insert the text, the content, which is the third argument of this this command. This is only this last quote here. Just there are some quotes which have a linguistic signification, and I chose to represent them in another way because they are what linguists call lexemes, and so I chose another kind of rendering of those quotes. But this just inserts the text. So as I said, this template selects the appropriate language, the label, and inserts the text in a command which I defined in the preamble of my LaTeX document. I'll show you about this. Its definition is here. So what does it do? And I'm finishing just in a bit. It checks for, this is the definition of my quote. It checks if it's an empty, if this value is empty. Otherwise, it inserts the label. Here I said this is the second argument. Then it checks for language. By default, it selects Spanish if it's empty. If it's not empty, it selects another language, and it uses I think this is Babel's other language environment. And this is important because if it's in Spanish, I enclose it in quotes, and I use the CS quotes package for that. Otherwise, I use simply I italicized it. I put it in italics if it's just an expression in another language. For Greek, I just decided not to italize because I don't think I need italicized Greek script when writing in Greek. Some people like italicized Greek, but I don't think it's needed. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And well, the conclusion is that I couldn't do all processing either on the XSLT transformation or on the LuaLaTeX or LaTeX document, but I had to do transformation in both processing, sorry, in both places. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if we have further time for questions or.
Thank you, Nicolás. We have plenty of time for questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. How much of TEI do you implement? Because I had to work with it myself a few years ago, and I was really scared by how thick the documentation is. It was more than 1,000 PDF pages back then, and I just checked, and now it's 2007. So how many of the TEI elements and attributes do you support?
Well, for this kind of edition, which is not a critical edition, and I don't have to include, for example, lemmas or readings, and it wasn't. I didn't want to create a facsimile edition. It was, I think, a very reduced subset of the TEI, the P5 version. So it's not very much which the elements which I needed really.
Thank you. So I chose a similar approach back then. I mean, I didn't need very complex formatting either, or semantic markup. And I also have a comment, which is that Babel now supports standard language tags. So I think you should look into that, because it may make a lot of your processing easier.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know about that.
Yes, it's pretty recent. So it's 2 years ago approximately. And I also have a note that the language tag that you wrote for Welsh is incorrect. You wrote CYN, and it's CYM. I don't know if that's in your code.
It should be, yeah, it should be a mistake of mine. Yeah, thank you. CYM?
CYM, Camry
okay.
in Welsh.
Yeah, that's a mistake in my code. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Frank has a question or remark.
Yeah, well, both in some sense. First of all, thank you for the talk. It was really interesting, and I love seeing TEI, and reminds me of Sebastian Ratz. And yeah, anyway, one small remark. Being a German, we have 2 hyphenation patterns, and in Babel that is by 2 language names. One is German, that's the old hyphenation, and there's N German for new hyphenation. I don't know which hyphenation you wanted, but just to say that. My question is about the early part where you showed your problems with spaces, and you showed input, which was a paragraph, a tagged paragraph followed by a note. Now, if I see this as input, it is a paragraph followed by a note. It is not a note at the end of the paragraph. So I was a bit surprised, first of all, to see that the note happens on the same line. But I wonder if you want to comment about this, because to me, that note sits separately from the paragraph as far as the XML is concerned.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Another way of doing this would be to include the note element within the P element.
Exactly. That's what I would expect to see, and then it should, from the transformation, in some sense, be more natural, and the note could actually, from a tech perspective, take away the space or something. But this year is really after the paragraph comes a note, so it shouldn't even be on the same line.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, but yeah, I can try that. I thought initially that this should be a quote, not on this last word, but on the whole paragraph. So that's why I thought about that. But I could try the other way you are mentioning it.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand what you were trying to express here, because I mean it's a bit of a complicated situation. As you said, you might want to have a note on the whole paragraph, and it's not quite clear how to express that in structural terms. But anyway, that was sort of my first impression. I thought, well, why is it even on the same line if it is coded like this? Concerning your in some degree, I mean, you translate XML into LaTeX, and the translation of your tags, the language tags, is not, in my view, not different to translating something like emphasis into \emph or into text BF or something. I find it rather natural to see that in the XSLT, whereas formatting, which you showed at the end, is actually sort of a task of text. So I think it is quite natural to me that you have these these two sides. One is translating to LaTeX, and one is LaTeX translating to output format. So I wouldn't worry about the fact that you have to do both. In some sense, it's just my feeling that this is actually sort of natural, and that you do one at one end and the other at the other. But just my impression to that. So I wouldn't worry about this considered as because translating to LaTeX, like the Babel names and those kind of things, this is the translation that happens before you do the final formatting, and the final formatting is then another step in some sense. My thoughts, but I love your thought, your talk, really nice.
Well, thank you very much.
You should have shown some pictures of the output in the end.
I can show you, but let me see if
can I? I'm worried we'll run out of time. I want to make some comments, if I may, about your. I think it's the previous slide.
Sure, this one.
No, it's the one that has the large sequence of XSL wens. Is that the one?
I think this is the one.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
I've come across this sort of thing before, and you've effectively got a table there.
Yeah.
Lookup table, and you could store that table in an external XML file. Load that XML file as one of the additional documents used in the transformation, and then index into that XML file to select the value of the language. So you can have a function that is the same all the time, and you simply have a table that does the translation. It's the feature of XML that you can have several input documents, and you can use data in the first input document to extract an element from the second. And that considerably reduces the complexity of the XSLT code, because it's always the same, always making that choice. And the complexity then is the lookup table.
Okay, but what would the benefit be of separating the XML files?
It means that your code base becomes smaller, that you are, what's the word? You have a simple piece of data that tells you what the translation table is. That's the benefit.
Okay.
Simply,
yeah.
If I was writing that in Python, what I would do is I would create a dictionary. I'd look up in the dictionary.
Okay.
Essentially, what you're doing is looking up a key in a dictionary.
Yeah. I understand.
And
key value
with the default value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So why not have a file that is the dictionary?
And well, how can I do that in XSLT? I don't really know.
Okay, and in XSLT,
Yeah.
you can load several XML documents.
Yeah.
And you can say, give me this element of that document. So you can use data in the first document as a key to find an element in the second.
Okay. Do you remember the XSLT
command? I think it's called. I think it's just called document. It just says some.
Okay.
You define a variable whose value is a document, and you specify the resource where to get the document.
Okay. Okay. I'll try that. Thank you.
I'll show off a little bit. Charles Goldfarb, the founder of the sort of father of HTML, there's a law named after him which says that if a text processing system has a bug, one of them is to do with line endings.
Okay.
there's some work on XSLT that I've promised to share with Rob Beezer of the Pretext project, Pretextbook project, and I think you'd be interested in sharing that too. So it's time for me to be prodding me with sticks until I do that, if possible.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you so much.
Can I go off topic, which is I read the obituary recently of Robert Hollander, who I've not heard of, and found he did this magnificent Dartmouth Dante project. And I wondered if you've come across it and had any comments on it.
Dante project? No, I don't know about that.
He produced an online compendium of all the translations of Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, I think I've the Dartmouth, yeah.
The Dartmouth one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't recall very much. I don't have an opinion on it. Sorry, but I've seen the project. Yeah.
Yeah. If I have an opinion of it, it's not an expert opinion. I'm just impressed.
Well, there are a lot of very interesting TEI-XML projects in the web. There's one which I like very much is the I think it's the women's writer project. I don't know where it is. Which is an excellent project, and there are hundreds right now, which are very technically advanced and also very nuanced in the way they deal with the texts.
The sort of creation of editions. Print was a great sort of incentive to understanding all the different editions and versions of documents. I think that must have been the starting. But you're encoding a manuscript, aren't you?
Yeah, that's one of the idea of this project, but in the moment I'm encoding an annotated translation of a manuscript, or of a critical edition of a set of manuscripts.
So are you making the translation, or does it already exist?
No, the translation is mine.
Okay. So is it one of these side-by-side translations?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because it has the original Latin from the manuscripts, but it also has the Spanish translation, and it also has a Middle English translation which exists, which has been edited today, and my idea is to create an edition of a critical edition of the printed editions, the first printed editions of this work, and that hasn't been done.
This is a bit like the way in which they determine when a species came into being by looking at the DNA.
Yeah, of course, that's exactly the same way.
I am very impressed by the way in which linguists can peer deeply into the past.
There's a whole debate on the philologists about how how can you do that, and if it's entirely possible. There are some philologists who claim that that's not possible, that you cannot reconstruct the ideal archetype of a lost work, but you can only deal with existing versions of it. Some philologists are very skeptical about that.
I think it's good to have skeptics in a community.
Of course, yeah.
Keeps the rest of us honest.
If there are some more questions, we have time. We are looking for the next speaker. He hasn't shown up yet, so we have time.
I can show you the resulting PDF.
Yes, with pleasure.
Yeah, sure. Share screen again. What's this? This is the resulting PDF. This is one version, and let me show you the text. See if I can. All these are the footnote anchors, and if you click to them, you have all the cross references. This is the bibliography, which, as I mentioned before, everything was done with LuaLaTeX. These are reference to the printed editions. As I'm showing this, these are all the endnotes, the commentaries, and as I mentioned, all processing. I didn't have to do any manual processing after I transformed the TEI-XML into LuaLaTeX. Besides the elimination of the Whitespace. I can show you the bibliography. I liked very much this. How do they call it in LuaLaTeX? The back references, wherever a work is cited, you can determine which page was cited, in which page it was cited. That's very interesting. I really enjoyed that functionality of LuaLaTeX, of LuaLaTeX. I don't know if you want to see any specific part of the translation.
I just remembered one more thing that I sort of noted when you were giving the talk. Just as a remark, you have encoded in the TEI course various emphasis in how they should be rendered, right? And you use the italic to translate to the \n command in LaTeX. I wonder whether you should actually use text IT at this point, simply because env in the LaTeX tries to do what you, in some sense, don't want to have, namely that it changes depending on context, and you have already encoded how it should be rendered in the source. So using env might suddenly get you upright text because you have nested stuff or so. So I think the translation to LaTeX here should probably be just text italic.
Yeah, you're right, Frank. As a side note, I must say that I don't know why sometimes env doesn't change to upright text in appropriate context. I don't know. I have that problem sometimes. I don't know if other people also have that. An emphasized passage inside an emphasized passage should be rendered as upright text, but sometimes it just skips. I don't know why in the italicized text.
If you come across an example, I would be interested to see it, just to understand what is happening. I mean, if you're working with LuaTeX and you're using the font spec commands to get your font that has an extended version of the implementation, and it might be that there is a bug in a certain situation. So I would be interested to get an example if you see that.
Okay,
just mail it to me or something.
Yeah, of course, I'll do that. Thank you.
I've got a genuine question this time. Would you be interested in a one-day conference, online of course, on XML to TeX to PDF?
No, of course. That would be great.
Is anybody else here interested in that? You can reply or you can send me an email. One-day conference, online, XML to TeX to PDF.
Great. I know some people who might be interested.
You can be my co-organizer.
Great. Thank you.
We got this here. Uwe Ziegenhagen. So I mustn't lose that email address.
Great.
That's three of us anyway.
Yeah, hi. Greetings from Germany.
Oh, hi. I've just made a note of.
I'll copy also my email here if you want it.
And that's me.
Great.
We're the Troika.
I'll send you an email, Jonathan.
Thanks.
I guess that if anyone has regrets and want to send email to each other, you can contact the organizer of the conference, and we will distribute the emails of people. I think that from one person to another person, we know each other, so we can communicate. And
so we'll copy the organizers. We're the child of the conference.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you again, Nicolás. That's really nice work, both in the process with XSLT and the results. That is beautiful.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.